Montana Territory, 1877. The sun had barely climbed over the jagged peaks when Bridget Palmer was told again that she was not good enough. "You are not wanted here," said Mrs. Lyle, the rancher's wife, her lips tight like she had been chewing lemons since dawn. "Your background, your choices, your situation. This is a respectable household." Bridget stood on the front porch of the Lyle ranch with her hands clasped in front of her, shoulders squared, even though her heart was cracking. She had scrubbed their laundry, cooked their meals, even helped mend a colt's torn leg with gentle fingers and quiet prayers. But none of it mattered, not when you were a woman with 2 children and no husband. "They are not your burden," Bridget said, her voice calm though her chest burned. "Just let me finish out the week." Mrs. Lyle shook her head. "They are not even proper white children. You should be ashamed." Bridget didn't respond. She turned, gathered her skirt, and walked down the porch steps. The wind caught her dark auburn hair and the hem of her faded blue dress. Her eyes stung, but she did not cry, not in front of them. Her children Virgil, age 6, and Violet, age 4, sat beneath the cottonwood tree by the fence, their small hands toying with pebbles and sticks. They looked up when she approached. "We have to go," she said simply. Virgil stood right away, grabbing Violet's hand like he always did. Violet dragged her doll, a worn thing made of corn husks, along behind her. Bridget took their hands and led them down the dusty road. They walked until their legs ached, heading toward the town of Alder Creek. It was the only place left where Bridget hadn't been turned away. She had no family, no friends, just the 2 children and the weight of too many whispered judgments. She had not been born into privilege. Her father had been a trapper, her mother a laundress. Then came the man who promised her everything and left her with nothing but a baby in her arms and another on the way. People said it was her fault, that decent men did not leave decent women behind, but none of them had seen how hard she worked. None of them had seen the way she held her babies when they cried in the night, or how she kept going, even when she had to take the worst jobs just to buy bread. By the time they reached Alder Creek, the sun hung low and gold in the sky. Bridget's boots were scuffed, her dress dusty. Virgil had started limping and Violet clung to her skirt. "Come on, just a little farther," Bridget said, crouching down to lift Violet into her arms. "We'll find something." But they were barely past the livery when Virgil stumbled and collapsed in the dirt. "Virgil," she cried, dropping to her knees. A shadow fell over them. Bridget looked up, breath catching. A man had dismounted from a tall black horse, dust trailing off his boots. He was broad-shouldered, maybe 30, with sun-browned skin, a strong jaw, and dark hair tucked beneath a wide-brimmed hat. His eyes were a deep gray blue, like a storm rolling in over the plains. "Your boy all right?" he asked, kneeling beside them. "He is just tired," Bridget said quickly, brushing sweat from Virgil's brow. "He has walked too far." The man looked between her and the 2 children. "You got somewhere to go," she hesitated. "Not yet, we were looking for work." Her voice caught. "Please, we do not need charity." He met her eyes then, not with pity but with something steadier, kinder. "My name is Silas Boone," he said. "I have a cattle ranch about 5 miles west. I need help keeping house and cooking for the hands. If you want the work, it is yours." Bridget blinked. "You do not even know me." "I know you are out here carrying 2 tired children across the road without asking anybody for a damn thing," he said. "That is good enough for me." Her mouth parted, but no words came. He stood and offered her his hand. "What is your name?" "Bridget Palmer," she said, placing her hand in his. His grip was warm and firm. "Well, Miss Palmer," he said, lifting Virgil with ease, "let us get you all home." Bridget rode behind him on the horse, one arm around Violet, the other steadying herself. She had not ridden in years, but Silas moved easy in the saddle, and his voice was calm when he spoke to the children, asking Virgil about his favorite animals and making Violet laugh with a story about a calf that thought it was a dog. By the time they reached the ranch, the sky had gone soft with twilight. The house was modest but clean, with a porch swing that creaked gently in the breeze. A barn stood out back, and a few hired hands nodded as they passed. Silas helped them down and opened the front door. "There is a spare room off the kitchen. You can settle in there. I will make sure there is food." Bridget turned to him, her voice low. You do not have to do this. I know, he said simply, but I want to, she nodded, unable to say more. That night, after the children were fed and tucked into the softest beds they had seen in months, Bridget stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself. Silas joined her, handing her a cup of coffee. It will cool fast, he said. She held the cup between her hands, letting the warmth soak into her skin. I do not understand, she said after a moment. Why would you help us? He looked out at the stars. My mother was a widow, raised me and my sister alone. People looked at her the same way they look at you. But she was stronger than all of them put together. Bridget swallowed the lump rising in her throat. You are not broken, Bridget, he said softly. You are just tired, and you deserve better than what the world has given you. She turned her face toward him. I have been told I am not good enough, over and over. Silas stepped closer, his voice steady. Well, you are good enough for me. She stared at him, breath caught in her chest, and for the first time in a long while she believed it. The morning came in quiet shades of gray and gold. Bridget stirred before the rooster called, her body aching in familiar ways from too little rest and too many miles walked the day before. She eased out of bed without waking Violet, who had curled into the crook of her brother's arm sometime during the night. The room smelled faintly of cedar and warm dust. In the kitchen, she found a sack of flour, a crock of lard, and a jar of sourdough starter left beside a folded cloth and a note scratched in a man's plain, blocky hand. Use what you need. She laid her palm on the wood counter. It had been wiped clean. Everything had a place. The thought of being allowed to belong to something orderly, something useful, made her chest tighten. She started mixing dough in a wide bowl, hands working from memory. The kitchen door creaked open behind her. You're up early, Silas said, voice low from sleep. Bridget didn't turn. Bread doesn't wait, he nodded, stepping past her to pour water from the pump into a tin cup. He drank, then leaned against the doorframe. I was going to fry potatoes, he said. But I reckon you'd do it better. I can make them if you have onions. Back root cellar, bottom shelf. She moved past him toward the back door, gathering her shawl. The morning was crisp and her breath clouded as she crossed the yard. The cellar door groaned when she opened it, and the cool earth smell hit her as she stepped down. Inside, she found the onions tied in dry bunches. She took two, then turned, startled to see Silas standing at the top of the stairs. You walked all the way down here just to watch me carry onions. No, he said, and something shifted in his expression. I came to ask what you want. Bridget straightened, onions in hand. I don't follow. I'll pay you fair for the work, he said. Your room, meals, all that. But if you're looking to move on soon, I'd like to know. She looked at him for a long moment. I want steadiness. I want my children to sleep without wondering where we'll wake up next. You'll have that here, he said without hesitation. She stepped past him, back into the daylight. After breakfast, Bridget washed the dishes while Virgil helped one of the ranch hands stack kindling behind the shed. Violet sat on the porch mending a scrap of cloth into her doll's dress, tongue poking out in concentration. By noon, Silas returned from riding fence, his shirt damp from sweat and his hair curling at the edges. He glanced at the kitchen doorway. You all right with livestock? He asked. Bridget dried her hands on her apron. I've handled goats and hogs. A few cows. I've got a heifer that won't take to her calf, needs someone with a softer touch. She followed him out to the barn, her boots crunching gravel. Inside, the cow stood uneasy in her stall, the calf pacing nearby. Silas motioned toward the calf. She's been pushing him off. Bridget approached slow, humming low under her breath. The calf paused, head tilting. She knelt, brushing her fingers along his jaw, then guided him toward the mother's side. The cow shifted but didn't kick. You've done this before, Silas said, a few times. Animals can tell when you're rushing them. He watched her, not the cow. You're not what I expected, she glanced at him. I've been told that before. Later, while she mended one of Virgil's shirts on the porch, Silas brought her a tin plate with a slice of apple tart. I didn't bake it, he said, but I had it sent from town, figured you might want something sweet. Bridget took the plate, her fingers brushing his. Thank you. He sat beside her, careful not to crowd. I know it's not my place, he said after a moment, but I'd like to know what you carry. Not to judge it, just to understand. Bridget set the plate down, the crust untouched. She folded the shirt in her lap, the needle still threaded. My children's father was a man who said all the right things. He left before Virgil could walk. I stayed near Fort Benton for a while, then further south. I worked where I could. When Violet came, I nearly died birthing her alone. A Métis woman nursed me back. After that, I stopped asking anyone to take me in. Silas didn't speak, but his hand rested on the porch rail close to hers. I've been told I don't belong anywhere, she said. That I made my bed, that I'm a burden. He turned to her fully. You've survived what most couldn't. That's not a burden, that's grit. She looked away. I don't say things I don't mean, he added. And I don't offer space to people who haven't earned it. Bridget's voice was soft. Why do you want us here? I don't have much family left. This place gets quiet, too quiet, you and the children. You make it feel like something's being built again. She turned toward him then, and the silence between them felt full, not empty. That night she sat beside the hearth while the children slept nearby, curled on a quilt. Silas brought in wood, setting it on the rack. The fire crackled low, shadows dancing on the walls. I'll be riding south come Friday, he said. Picking up a fresh herd might be gone a week. Bridget nodded. We'll manage. He hesitated near the door. Would you stay? Even after I come back, she didn't answer right away. But when she finally met his gaze, it was steady. Yes. Silas touched the brim of his hat and stepped out into the night. Bridget turned back to the fire, the warmth reaching her fingers, her bones. For the first time in a long while, the quiet didn't feel like loneliness, but like space being made for something new. Bridget let the door swing shut behind her, balancing a pail of eggs against her hip as she stepped into the kitchen. A soft drizzle had started while she was out near the henhouse, and her shawl clung damp to her shoulders. The scent of wet earth followed her inside. She set the pail on the work table, brushing her sleeve over her brow. A few strands of hair had slipped loose from the knot at the base of her neck. She tucked them behind her ear and turned to find Violet standing in the doorway, one hand gripping the edge of the doorframe, the other holding a crude wooden horse carved from a branch. He's not crying, Violet said, her voice small. But Virgil says his belly hurts. Bridget dried her hands and dropped to a knee. Did he eat anything strange? No, just beans and cornbread like you gave us. Violet twisted the horse in her hand. He didn't finish it, though. Bridget rose swiftly, her footsteps brisk but quiet as she crossed the house. She found Virgil curled on the cot with his knees drawn up, face pale and damp with sweat. The hearth behind him gave off a low heat, but he shivered beneath the quilt. She pressed the back of her hand to his forehead, then lifted his shirt to feel his side. His skin was hot, but his stomach wasn't distended. Where does it hurt, sweetheart? Virgil's lips barely moved. Right here, he whispered, pointing low on his right side. Bridget's heart stilled. She didn't waste a moment. She found her boots, pulled them on, then grabbed her shawl again. Violet, you stay right here. Don't open the door for anyone but Mr. Boone. Do you understand? Violet nodded solemnly, clutching the wooden horse to her chest. Bridget stepped out into the rain. The drops had thickened, pattering against the porch roof and soaking her sleeves. She crossed the yard to the barn, where the ranch hands were finishing the evening chores. One of them, a lean man named Elias with a crooked nose and a quiet way about him, looked up as she approached. "Where's Silas?" she asked, breath catching, still down near Red Bluff, won't be back till the end of the week. She hesitated. "Virgil's sick. I think it might be his appendix. I need a doctor." Elias frowned. "Only one near enough is Dr. Tully in Alder Creek, but that's a half-day's ride. Maybe faster if the roads ain't too thick with mud." "I need your fastest horse," she said. "You can't ride alone in this. I can and I will." He stared at her, then nodded. 15 minutes later, she rode out of the yard on the back of a strong bay gelding, hunched low against the wind. The rain stung her face and the road vanished beneath a slick layer of mud, but she kept going. She had no saddle, just a blanket and a rope halter, but she didn't slow. By the time she reached Alder Creek, her dress clung to her legs and her hands were raw from gripping the reins. She found Dr. Tully's place by the faint glow of a lantern in the window. He opened the door before she could knock twice. "Boy's got a fever and pain on his right side," she said before he could speak. "He needs you now." Dr. Tully, a gray-bearded man with sharp eyes, didn't argue. He packed his bag with practiced speed and followed her back out into the storm. They returned to the ranch near midnight. Elias had kept a fire going and boiled water. Bridget rushed inside ahead of the doctor, finding Violet asleep in a chair and Virgil still curled on the cot, his face flushed. Dr. Tully examined him under the lamplight, then turned to her, voice low. "He's lucky. Looks like it's early. I'll need your help." She washed her hands without being asked. The night passed in a blur of whispered instructions, hot cloths and steady hands. She held the boy's wrist through it all, whispering old lullabies from her childhood that no one but her mother had ever sung to her. By morning, the rain had stopped. Dr. Tully packed his instruments and stood from the chair near the hearth. "He'll live." "You got him help just in time." Bridget looked down at her son, breathing easier now, his face pale but calm. She blinked once, then again, holding back the tide behind her eyes. "Thank you," she managed. The doctor gave a small nod. "He's a strong one." "Gets that from you?" She walked him out, the porch boards damp beneath her bare feet. The clouds had broken, and the first light of dawn painted the hills in soft gold. When she turned, she found Silas riding in from the trail, hat pulled low, clothes dusted with travel. He dismounted before the horse had stopped moving. "What happened?" he asked, eyes sharp as he saw her face. "Virgil got sick," she said. "I rode to town for the doctor. He's resting now." Silas looked at her, then passed her toward the open door. "You went alone." "I had to." His jaw worked once, like he meant to speak, but didn't. Then he stepped forward and put his hand on her shoulder. "You did right." She didn't move away. "I should have been here," he added, "but you weren't," she said. "And I didn't fall apart." He looked at her then, not with admiration, but with something deeper, something settled. "You ever think about staying for good?" he asked. She glanced toward the doorway where her children were sleeping safe and warm. "It's all I've thought about." Silas reached for her hand, rough palm against hers. "Then stay, not just for work, not just because it's shelter. Stay because I'd be a fool to let you go." Bridget's throat tightened, but she didn't look away. "I've been told I wasn't good enough." He stepped closer, voice low. "Good enough for me." The wind shifted, carrying the smell of wet grass and wood smoke through the yard. She let her hand stay in his, heart steady for the first time in years. She had come here with nothing but 2 children and a spine made of iron. Now she had roots. She had a man who saw her strength not as something to fear, but something to honor, and for the first time she believed she could stay. The frost lingered longer than usual that April, clinging stubborn to fence posts and the low eaves of the barn, as if winter hadn't quite finished its say. Bridget folded the wool blanket tighter around Violet's shoulders before stepping out into the yard. The girl was still pale, though her color had returned enough for her to sit upright without swaying. Inside, Virgil slept soundly, chest rising steady beneath the patchwork quilt Silas had brought down from the attic. The boy still tired easily, but he no longer winced when he stood. Bridget passed the pump and paused at the trough, where the surface water had frozen in a thin crust. She cracked it with the toe of her boot, the sound sharp in the morning hush. Silas approached from the west side of the barn, a coil of fencing wire slung over one shoulder. He didn't speak right away, only nodded as he set the coil down beside the gate. "You plan to ride into town this week?" she asked, brushing her hands down her apron. "I do. Need to pick up nails and a new harness buckle. Farrier's got a bay waiting too. My sewing's caught up." "If you'd like, I could go with you." He looked up, surprised but not displeased. "You sure you're ready to leave the children a while?" Elias offered to watch them. "His sister's been visiting from Butte. She's taken a liking to Violet." Silas leaned against the fence rail, the sun glinting off the silver buckle at his belt. "Truth is, I'd be glad for the company." They rode out after breakfast 2 days later, the trail mostly dry but still soft in the hollows. Bridget rode side saddle on the roan mare Silas had gentled himself. She held the reins with one gloved hand and kept her back straight, body swaying slightly with the rhythm of the horse, not stiff but sure. "You were taught to ride proper," Silas said, glancing over. "My father taught me. He said I'd have no business in the world if I couldn't ride, read, or shoot straight. Sounds like a man who knew what mattered." He was, she said. Hard but fair. They passed a pair of riders heading north traders by the looks of the packs and reached Alder Creek near noon. Bridget hadn't been back since that night she rode through thunder and rain. The town looked different now. Not gentler, but smaller somehow. At the mercantile, she waited near the dry goods while Silas spoke with the owner about supplies. A young woman behind the counter, no more than 20, eyed Bridget's plain dress and patched gloves. "You Boone's housekeeper?" she asked, voice clipped. "No," Bridget said, lifting a bolt of muslin. "I'm his partner." The girl's mouth parted, but she said nothing more. Back outside, Silas helped load the wagon. "You all right?" "Yes, you seemed quiet in there." Bridget adjusted her shawl. "Some folks think they know who I am just by looking." "I stopped caring what folks thought the day I buried my sister," he said. "She did everything proper and still didn't get to grow old." Bridget's eyes softened. "You've not spoken of her before. She was 3 years younger, married a cattleman. He died in a flash flood. She tried to carry the place alone, but the bank came calling before the end of the year. She passed that winter. Fever took her quick. I'm sorry." "There's nothing to be sorry for," he said, "but I don't forget. When I see someone fighting for what they love, I pay attention." They drove back slow, the sun lower in the sky, the air sweet with thawing grass. At the bend in the trail, he stopped the wagon and stepped down. Bridget looked at him, puzzled. "Come here," he said, offering his hand. She hesitated, then took it, stepping down beside him. The trail opened to a meadow ringed by cottonwoods just beginning to bud. He motioned across it. "I've been thinking about building something more," he said. "A room for the children of their own, a root cellar deeper than the one we've got, maybe even a smokehouse." She watched the meadow, the way the light caught the pale green tips of the grass. "I'd like to build it with you," he added. Her voice was quiet. "You're asking more than help with wood and stone." "I am." She turned to face him fully, hands folded at her waist. "I've been told I was too much, too ruined, that men might take me in but never keep me." "I'm not most men, I know," she said simply. He took a step closer. "I don't want to take you in. I want to build a life with you, one where your children know steadiness, one where you sleep knowing the roof will hold." She didn't cry, she didn't tremble, she only nodded, slow and certain. "Then let's build it." They rode home in silence, but it was the kind of silence that held no distance. When they reached the yard, Violet ran out, her face bright. "Mr. Elias made biscuits," she called, holding one up proudly. Bridget lifted her down from the wagon and kissed her brow. "Did you save me one?" "I saved you too." That night, after the children were asleep, Bridget stepped out to the porch. The moon hung pale and wide above the fields. Silas joined her, his shoulder brushing hers as he leaned against the post. "You warm enough?" he asked. "I've been colder in better houses," she replied. He smiled faintly, then reached into his coat and pulled out a small, worn box. He opened it carefully. Inside lay a gold band, thin but polished to a soft shine. "It was my mother's," he said. "She wore it every day until the day she passed." Bridget looked at it, then at him. "Will you wear it?" he asked. She didn't need time to think. Yes, he slid it onto her finger. It fit without forcing. "I never imagined a place like this," she said. "You didn't imagine it," he replied. "You made it." She leaned into him then, her head resting gently against his shoulder. The stars blinked above them, quiet and unhurried. And beneath them, the house stood steady, warm and waiting, with room enough for all of them inside. The wedding was held beneath a stand of cottonwoods, the same stretch of meadow where Silas had first spoken of building something more. There was no preacher in Alder Creek who knew Bridget well enough to say anything true about her. So Silas rode west to fetch Reverend Harlan from Ruby Valley, a man who had once married Silas's parents and who still remembered the Boone family with affection. Bridget wore a dress she had stitched herself from a bolt of pale dove-colored lawn, trimmed with a strip of lace she'd taken from the collar of her mother's old Sunday blouse. It was simple, but finely made, and it fit her as though it had been waiting all along to be hers. Violet had plucked wildflowers that morning, larkspur and yellow bell, and wore them tied with twine at her wrist. Virgil stood beside Silas, chin lifted, hair combed flat, a piece of polished agate tucked in his pocket for luck. There were no pews, just benches made from wagon planks balanced on stumps. Elias and a few of the hands came clean-shaven and quiet, their hats pressed solemnly to their chests. The air was warm and still, the kind of day that made you believe the land was holding its breath for something sacred. Reverend Harlan cleared his throat and looked at the couple standing before him. "Marriage," he said, "is not a promise of ease, it's a promise of presence, of standing beside one another when the roof leaks and the money runs lean and the nights feel longer than the days." He looked at Bridget. "Do you accept this man to stand beside you?" "I do." He turned to Silas. "And do you accept this woman to stand beside you?" "I do." The Reverend bowed his head. "Then let it be done." There was no kiss in the ceremony, not in the way Reverend Harlan performed it. But Silas reached for her hand and brought it to his chest, pressing it just above his heart. Bridget didn't look away. The connection between them had been built slow and honest, like every good thing on the frontier, and now it stood solid as the timber frame of the house behind them. That evening, after the others had gone and the children had been tucked into bed with their new quilts, Bridget stepped out onto the porch. The last light of day stretched long over the pasture, gold brushing the tops of the grass. Silas came up behind her, boots soft on the floorboards. He didn't speak right away, he rarely did when something mattered, but she felt his presence like the warmth of a fire after a cold ride. "I've made space in the ledger for your name," he said, folding his arms as he leaned beside her. "This place is half yours now. The land, the cattle, all of it. I don't need my name in ink to know I belong. Still," he said, reaching into his vest pocket and pulling out a folded sheet of parchment. "I saw the lawyer in Virginia City last week. It's all drawn up, all legal." Bridget unfolded the paper slowly. Her name was there, written with care, Bridget Palmer Boone. She ran her fingers over the ink, then looked up. "You think of everything." "I try." She turned toward him, laying her hand gently on his chest. "I never thought I'd have a place that wouldn't be taken from me, not just a roof, but this." Silas covered her hand with his own. "You gave it shape, I just helped hold it steady." They didn't speak again for a while. The wind picked up, catching the edge of the porch curtain and lifting it like a breath. From inside came the faint sound of Violet's laughter, followed by the creak of the bed frame as Virgil shifted in sleep. Bridget rested her head against Silas's shoulder. "We should plant in the morning. The ground's thawed deep enough. I'll hitch the team before breakfast." She looked up at him, eyes steady. "And after that," he smiled, small and sure. "After that we live." Years passed, but the house remained, its porch painted fresh each spring, its windows warm with light through winter. The cattle grew fat in the summer grass, and the children taller with each harvest. Virgil took to working the land, steady and deliberate, while Violet learned the names of every herb growing wild behind the barn and kept a book of pressed flowers on her shelf. Bridget never stopped sewing, not because she needed to, but because her hands liked the rhythm of it. She mended trousers and hemmed dresses and eventually pieced together a quilt made from the scraps of all their lives. The blue from Violet's first Sunday dress, the brown from Virgil's work shirt, the faded green from Silas's wedding vest. She stitched it by lamplight and finished it one autumn when the nights began to stretch longer again. Silas built the smokehouse, just like he'd promised, and added a second room before the first snow that year. Every board was fitted with care, every beam strong enough to last. He never called himself a builder, but Bridget knew he'd been building all along her trust, their life, this quiet, steady love that held fast no matter how hard the wind blew in the evenings. After supper, they sat together by the fire. Sometimes she read aloud while he sharpened tools or carved wooden animals for Violet's growing collection. Other nights, they simply sat, the silence between them full of everything they had weathered and everything they had yet to see. One spring morning, after the last frost had broken and the lilacs bloomed along the fence, Silas found Bridget in the garden with her hands sunk deep in the soil. She looked up, her face smudged with dirt, and smiled. "There's a new row of strawberries coming in," she said. "I thought we'd make jam." He crouched beside her, brushing a curl of hair from her cheek. "You've got soil on your nose, then kiss it off." He did. And the sun rose steady over the house, over the fields and fences and folded hills, over the lives they'd built not all at once, but piece by piece with patience, with work, and with a love that held. Always.